At the reading of my grandpa's will, my aunt scoffed and said, "He would never leave you anything, May. You were just his charity case." That's when I knew she had no idea what was coming. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I sat quietly in the lawyer's office, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The room felt colder than ever. My family sat around the big oak table, their faces tight with fake sadness. Aunt Lorraine sat right across from me, her lips curved into that same cruel smile I had known my whole life. She whispered something to her son, Drew, and they both laughed softly like I couldn't hear. Everyone knew what they thought, that I didn't belong there. That Grandpa Everett only took me in because he pitied me. My mother had died when I was a child, and my father had disappeared soon after. Grandpa raised me, but to the rest of the family, I was always the outsider. The poor girl who got lucky. The charity case. Lorraine always made sure I remembered that. She'd tell people I should be grateful for a roof over my head, that Grandpa was too kind for his own good. Even now, as we waited for the lawyer to begin, she kept looking at me like she couldn't wait to watch me get embarrassed. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened a brown envelope. "This is the last will and testament of Everett Carter," he said. The air in the room grew still. Lorraine sat up straight, already smiling like she knew what was coming. I tried to prepare myself for disappointment. But then, as he began to read, something changed. My name came up first. Grandpa had left me his home, the family estate, and all his personal letters. The lawyer went on, saying that I would also inherit his shares in the family business. My breath caught in my throat. I thought I'd misheard him. Lorraine's face turned pale. "That's not possible," she said, her voice shaking. She must have tricked him. He would never do this. Drew just stared at me, his mouth open in shock. I couldn't speak. I didn't understand why Grandpa had left everything to me. He had always loved me, yes, but this? This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Then the lawyer handed me a smaller envelope. It had my name on it, written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter that said, "You'll find the truth in the lockbox beneath the oak. Don't trust what they say about your mother." I looked up, but everyone was still arguing. No one noticed the tears in my eyes. At that moment, I realized Grandpa had left me more than money. He had left me a secret, and a reason to finally uncover the truth about everything my family had tried to hide. When I think back to my childhood, it feels like looking through a fogged window. My mother was the kindest person I can remember, but she was gone too soon. One morning she kissed me goodbye, and by nightfall, she was gone forever. My father couldn't handle the loss. Within weeks, he left and never came back. I was only 7 when Grandpa Everett came to take me in. He opened his home and his heart without a second thought. To me, he was safety. To Aunt Lorraine, I was an inconvenience. From the moment I arrived, she made sure I knew I didn't belong. She would say things like, "You're lucky he even took you in, Maeve," or, "Don't expect much, dear, you're just a burden." I tried to stay out of her way, but no matter how quiet I was, she always found a reason to criticize me. At family dinners, Lorraine would make jokes that stung, and everyone would laugh to keep the peace. When Grandpa defended me, she'd roll her eyes and say he was getting sentimental in his old age. I used to wonder what I had done wrong to deserve her hatred. Grandpa would tell me to ignore her, but words have a way of sinking deep, especially when you're a child trying to belong. School became my escape. I threw myself into studying, hoping that good grades might make her see me differently. They didn't. Lorraine only grew colder as I got older. When I earned a scholarship, she said I should thank her for letting me stay in her father's house all those years. I didn't argue. I had learned that silence was safer. While other kids spent summers at the lake or traveling, I worked. I took shifts at a diner in the mornings and cleaned offices at night. Every dollar I earned went toward my books and bus fare. There were nights when I came home so tired I fell asleep still wearing my shoes. But I didn't complain. I wanted to prove, maybe only to myself, that I could survive without their approval. Through it all, Grandpa remained my only light. Sometimes he'd find me in the kitchen late at night, bent over my textbooks. He'd pour himself tea, sit down beside me, and say softly, "Let them laugh, Maeve. You'll have the last word someday." I didn't know what he meant then, but his voice always calmed me. Even when Lorraine spread lies about me to the rest of the family, saying I was ungrateful or only nice when I wanted something, Grandpa never doubted me. He saw me for who I was, not what they said. That faith became my armor. Looking back now, I realize he was preparing me for something greater. Every cruel word, every long night working, every quiet tear, I was building strength I didn't know I'd need. Grandpa believed in me when no one else did, and that belief became the only thing that kept me standing. The lawyer's voice filled the room, steady and calm, though every word made my pulse race faster. My name echoed again and again, each mention sounding unreal. The estate, the company shares, the personal letters, all of it was mine. I sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid this was some cruel mistake that would vanish if I breathed too loudly. Around me, no one spoke at first. The air hung heavy, as if time itself had stopped to watch. Then Lorraine's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "That's ridiculous," she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "He would never do that. This must be forged." Her face flushed red, her eyes wild. She turned to me, pointing an accusing finger. "You manipulated him, didn't you? You took advantage of an old man who didn't know what he was doing." Her words stung, but I couldn't respond. My throat tightened, and I just stared at her. The lawyer calmly assured her the documents were verified, the signatures witnessed, every page authenticated. Still, she wouldn't stop. "You always wanted to take what wasn't yours," she hissed. Drew shifted uncomfortably beside her, saying nothing, his gaze fixed on the floor. I looked at the lawyer again, trying to make sense of it all. Grandpa's house, his life's work, even the letters he wrote, he left them to me. The same man who once told me that patience was stronger than pride had entrusted me with everything he built. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to give Lorraine the satisfaction of seeing me cry. The lawyer handed me a smaller envelope, separate from the rest. My name was written on it in Grandpa's familiar, uneven handwriting. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note inside. The scent of old paper and ink rose softly, and for a moment, it felt like he was right there beside me. The message was short, only a few lines, but it sent a chill down my spine. "You'll find the truth in the lockbox beneath the oak. Don't trust what they say about your mother." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. The noise in the room faded. Lorraine's angry voice became a distant echo. My mind raced with questions. What truth? What lockbox? And what did he mean about my mother? Lorraine kept ranting, but I barely heard her. I felt an ache in my chest that wasn't just grief. It was something deeper, a pull toward answers I didn't know I needed. Grandpa had never spoken much about my mother's past, only that she was good-hearted and misunderstood. I thought the secrets had died with her. Now, holding that note, I realized he had left me not just an inheritance, but a mystery. Something hidden beneath the surface, waiting for me to uncover it. I looked toward the window, where sunlight filtered through the blinds, and whispered silently to myself, "I'll find it, Gran. I promise." The next morning, I drove to the old property, the one Grandpa had loved more than anything. The air felt heavier there, still and watchful, like the place itself remembered more than it should. The oak tree stood tall at the edge of the field, its roots twisted deep into the ground. Grandpa used to call it the heart of the land. Now I understood why he'd mentioned it in his note. I knelt beneath its wide branches, brushing aside fallen leaves. The soil was damp and cold, clinging to my fingers. I dug slowly, afraid of what I might find, until my hand hit something solid. It was a small metal box, old and rusted, but still locked tight. My heart thudded as I carried it to the porch. After a few tries, the latch gave way with a sharp click. Inside were several neatly stacked envelopes, yellowed with ink. The first was addressed to me, though the handwriting was firmer than the letter I'd received before. I unfolded it carefully. Grandpa's words were few but clear. He wrote that the contents of the box would explain the choices he had made and the mistakes he could never undo. Under the letter lay a bundle of documents tied with a faded ribbon. I spread them out on the table. They were medical papers, legal records, and finally, a DNA report. My eyes moved down the page until I froze on the name. Drew Carter. Everett Carter. The line connecting them made my stomach twist. The result confirmed what seemed impossible. Drew wasn't his father's son. He was Grandpa's. I sat back, staring at the paper, trying to steady my breathing. A dull ringing filled my ears. The truth hit like a storm, sudden and merciless. Lorraine's bitterness, her cruelty, her constant need to remind me that I didn't belong. It wasn't just hatred. It was guilt. She had spent her life hiding a secret that could destroy her. Among the papers was an old photograph. My mother stood beside a man who looked unmistakably like Lorraine's husband. Only when I looked closer, the resemblance wasn't quite right. The man in the picture had Grandpa's eyes. My chest tightened. Everything shifted in that instant. The whispers, the tension, the way Lorraine flinched whenever Grandpa spoke his daughter's name. It all made sense now. I folded the photo and placed it back in the box. The air outside had turned colder, and the branches above creaked softly in the wind. Grandpa's guilt was buried here as deeply as this lockbox had been. He hadn't just wanted to leave me wealth. He wanted to free me from lies that had poisoned our family for decades. As I locked the box again, I felt a strange mix of sadness and strength. The truth was ugly, but it was mine now. For the first time, I saw Lorraine not as someone powerful, but as someone broken by her own deceit. And I knew sooner or later, she would have to face what she had done. I went to see Lorraine the next evening. She was alone, sitting in her spotless living room with a glass of wine in her hand. The curtains were drawn tight, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and bitterness. When she saw me at the door, her smile was cold and small. "Come to gloat?" she asked, her voice sharp. I said nothing, only stepped inside and closed the door behind me. She laughed, a short, hollow sound. "You think you've won, don't you? You've always been the little victim, waiting for someone to hand you everything." Her tone wavered, but her eyes stayed fixed on mine. I let her talk. She wanted to hurt me, but she didn't realize how much truth I already carried. "I found something," I said softly. That was enough to make her freeze. Her fingers tightened around her glass. "What do you mean?" I took a slow breath. "The box under the oak. The letters. The photo." Her face drained of color. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed again, weaker this time. "Of course he'd leave that for you. He couldn't leave well enough alone." Her voice cracked, and the mask slipped. "Yes, I made mistakes," she said suddenly. "But I gave him my youth, my loyalty. Do you think it was easy for me? To watch him dote on you, to see everything I was promised handed to someone else." She stood up, pacing across the rug. "You have no idea what it was like. I loved him once. He said he loved me too. And when I got pregnant, he told me it didn't matter, that he'd make sure we were cared for. But then he changed his mind. He married my sister instead." Her words came out in a rush, trembling and raw. I stayed still, letting her unravel. Every word matched what I'd already seen in the papers. She didn't notice the small recorder hidden in my coat pocket. Her confession spilled freely, twisted by regret and pride. "All I ever wanted was my fair share," she said. "He owed me that. You," her voice shook, "you stole my life, Maeve. Everything that should have been mine." I could have told her she was wrong, that Grandpa's choices were his own, that I'd never stolen anything. But there was no point. Her anger had nowhere left to go except at me. I only watched as she sank back into her chair, her tears smudging her makeup, her hands trembling around the empty glass. When I left her house, the night was quiet, the air cool against my skin. I had the truth recorded, but I didn't feel triumphant. There would be a time to use it, but not yet. Ruining her now would be too easy, too quick. I wanted her to see herself unravel, to feel the weight of her own lies. Revenge, I decided, would come when silence hurt her more than anything I could ever say. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Within days, everyone in the family knew what Grandpa had left me. The calls started first, short, cold, full of fake sympathy that quickly turned into accusation. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly cared enough to tell me how disappointed they were. Some said I must have tricked him. Others whispered that Grandpa wasn't in his right mind when he signed the papers. I stopped answering the phone altogether. Drew didn't call at all. For a while, I thought maybe he was torn, caught between what he'd learned and what he wanted to believe. But when I saw him again at a family gathering, the look in his eyes told me everything. He walked past me without a word, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Lorraine had gotten to him. Whatever bond we had was gone, swallowed by her bitterness. They started telling people I was greedy, that I'd spent years pretending to be the loving granddaughter just to get my hands on Grandpa's money. The gossip spread fast. At the store, old neighbors whispered behind my back. Even people from the company avoided my calls. It stung, but I refused to hide. Grandpa had trusted me, and I owed it to him to keep standing tall. The estate was quiet when I moved in. The walls smelled of old wood and dust, the garden overgrown with weeds. Still, it felt like home. I started spending my days cleaning, repairing, breathing life back into every corner. In one of the upstairs rooms, I found a stack of old boxes labeled with Grandpa's handwriting. Inside were journals, ledgers, and notes from his years running the business. The pages were filled with neat numbers and precise detail. But as I read deeper, I noticed things that didn't add up. Missing amounts, unrecorded transfers, strange signatures that appeared over and over again. It didn't take long to see a pattern. Lorraine had been taking money from the company for years, carefully enough that no one questioned it. Grandpa must have found out, but instead of exposing her, he had kept quiet, maybe out of guilt for what had happened long ago. Each page I turned made my stomach tighten. She hadn't just hurt me, she'd betrayed the man she claimed to love. All her cruelty, all her anger, it wasn't just resentment. It was fear of being found out. I stayed up late into the night, piecing together the proof, my lamp casting a soft glow across the desk. The house creaked around me as if it were listening. I felt Grandpa's presence in those moments, calm and steady. He hadn't left me the company for wealth. He'd left it so I could set things right. I knew then what I had to do. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And the truth was going to speak louder than any of their lies ever could. I spent several nights at the desk in Grandpa's study, surrounded by stacks of papers, receipts, and journals. The air smelled of ink and old wood. Every detail I uncovered painted a clearer picture of what Lorraine had done. There was no mistake now. The missing money, the false reports, the forged signatures. It was all there, written in her own hand. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of actually doing it made my chest tighten. Still, silence would make me no better than her. So I opened my laptop and began to write. The letter wasn't angry or emotional. It was calm, careful, and built on facts. I addressed it to the board of Everett Timber Company, the same men and women who had known my grandfather for decades. I explained how certain records had been altered, how company funds had been redirected into private accounts, and how the evidence led directly to Lorraine. I attached copies of every document, every signature, every date. When I hit send, my hands trembled. For a moment, I wondered if I had gone too far. But then I thought of Grandpa, how he had trusted me to protect what he built. I closed the laptop and waited. It didn't take long for the storm to break. By the next morning, I started receiving messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. The board had called an emergency meeting. By noon, Lorraine's name had been removed from every official record. Her access to the company accounts was revoked. The same people who once smiled at her with admiration now treated her like a stranger. That evening, her downfall made the rounds online. Business news headlines, social gossip, whispers that wouldn't fade. The woman who spent her life chasing respect now had none left. I didn't celebrate. I just sat by the window of Grandpa's study, staring out at the trees he once planted, feeling the weight of quiet justice. But Lorraine didn't go quietly. She tried to twist the story, spreading rumors that I had forged the evidence to get her out of the way. Her friends repeated her words, but they didn't last long. The documents were too strong, the proof too clean. No one could argue against it. A few nights later, Drew came to the estate. He didn't knock, he just walked in, his face pale and tense. "You could have stopped this," he said, his voice breaking. "You could have gone to her first." "I gave her enough chances," I replied. He stared at me, shaking his head. "You don't understand," he said. "You think you're helping him, but you're destroying us." His words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Then, as if something inside him cracked, he blurted out, "I always knew. She didn't have to tell me. I've never been my father's son." For a long moment, we both stood there, the silence thick between us. His anger faded, replaced by something hollow. When he finally left, I watched his car disappear down the long drive, and I realized that truth, once spoken, doesn't just free you, it breaks everything that was built on lies. The story spread faster than I imagined. By the end of the week, every paper in town carried Lorraine's name. Reporters camped outside her gated house, shouting questions she refused to answer. The same people who once praised her for her grace and business sense now treated her like a scandal. Photos of her leaving the company office, face hidden behind sunglasses, filled every local site. The woman who used to host charity dinners and speak at luncheons had become a ghost in her own world. Her friends stopped calling, her neighbors looked away, and within a month, the bank repossessed her house. She tried to sell her jewelry, her furniture, anything to keep up appearances, but the damage was already done. The name she guarded so fiercely was now a reminder of deceit. Through it all, I said nothing. Reporters tried to reach me, but I never gave a single interview. I didn't need to explain. My silence spoke more clearly than any defense. Every time someone mentioned her, I simply nodded and changed the subject. Let them guess. Let them wonder. Words couldn't do what silence could. Let the truth breathe on its own. While sorting through boxes in the study one evening, I found a small bundle tied with string at the bottom of an old drawer. Inside were letters addressed to my mother, written in Grandpa's familiar hand. The paper had yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. Each letter carried pieces of his heart, memories, apologies, and love that had never found peace. He wrote about choices made in weakness, about the weight of guilt he carried for letting lies control the family. One line caught my breath. "If she ever reads these, tell Maeve that love and regret often grow from the same root." Reading his words felt like hearing his voice again, soft and tired, full of sorrow. For the first time, I understood that what he left me wasn't meant to destroy anyone. It was his way of setting things right, even if it took years and pain to do it. He had lived with the burden of knowing the truth and wanted to leave honesty in place of shame. I placed the letters back in their bundle and set them on the desk beside his photograph. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field. The house felt warmer, somehow lighter. Lorraine had lost everything she valued, status, wealth, control, but I had gained something she never could, peace in knowing the truth. Grandpa hadn't meant for vengeance. He had wanted freedom, for me, for my mother's memory, and perhaps even for himself. I decided to bring them all together one last time. The invitation was simple, a dinner for the family, a chance for closure after months of tension. Most accepted out of curiosity, some out of guilt. Lorraine came too, though she looked like a shadow of the woman she once was. Her perfect hair was dull, her confident stride replaced by small, uncertain steps. She didn't greet me when she entered, only glanced around the estate she'd once dreamed of owning. The dining room glowed softly under the chandelier. The table was set with Grandpa's old silverware, the same set Lorraine used to polish for parties. The others murmured awkwardly, stealing glances between her and me. No one dared start a real conversation. The air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. When the meal ended, I stood. My voice stayed calm, steady. I asked you all here because you deserve to know the truth. The room went silent. I reached for the envelope beside my plate and laid its contents on the table: documents, photographs, and the DNA report. I explained each one carefully, without raising my voice. Faces around me turned pale as the truth unfolded. The affair, the hidden son, the money that had vanished from the company for years. Lorraine tried to interrupt, but her words faltered. She looked from one paper to another, searching for a lie she could cling to. None existed. Her hands trembled as she pushed back her chair, but I continued. These aren't rumors, I said quietly. They're facts. Grandpa knew, and now so do all of you. Someone gasped. Another whispered her name. Lorraine stood, shaking her head. You think this makes you better than me? She snapped. You've ruined everything. Her voice cracked under its own weight. I met her eyes, my heart steady for the first time in years. You told me Grandpa would never leave me anything, I said softly. Turns out, he left me everything you ever wanted, and the truth you never could face. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Lorraine's defiance broke in an instant. Her face crumpled, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She turned away from the table, trying to hold herself together as the family stared in stunned silence. Drew rose to follow her, but she brushed past him, her heels clicking down the hall until the sound disappeared. No one spoke for a long while. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was cleansing. I gathered the papers and tucked them back into the envelope. Now you know, I said, and that was enough. When the night ended, the guests left one by one, their expressions heavy with realization. I stood at the window, watching the taillights fade down the drive. The estate was quiet again, the way Grandpa liked it. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider anymore. The truth had taken its place at the table, and it was mine to keep. Months passed, and the noise that once surrounded my family faded into quiet. The estate no longer felt haunted by secret. The walls seemed to breathe again, free from the tension that had lived inside them for years. I spent my days restoring every corner, keeping the old charm but filling it with something new: hope. The land that once carried so much pain slowly turned into a place of healing. Part of the house became something more than I had planned. With Grandpa's resources, I started a small foundation for children who had lost their parents. I named it after my mother, so her kindness wouldn't be forgotten. The first time I saw the laughter of those children echo through the halls, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't about wealth or legacy anymore. It was about giving meaning to everything that had been broken. Some of the family never came back. Drew moved away quietly, leaving no word behind. Lorraine vanished from public life, and I never saw her again. I didn't need to. My anger toward her had burned itself out. What remained was pity, an understanding that she had already destroyed herself long before I ever stood up to her. One evening, as I sorted through Grandpa's belongings in his old study, I found an envelope tucked between two books. It was sealed with his familiar handwriting. My heart trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was short, written with the shaky strokes of his final days. You weren't my charity, May. You were my redemption. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For so long, I had believed I was a burden he carried out of duty. Now I understood. Taking me in hadn't been pity. It had been love, a way for him to right the wrongs of his past. I walked outside, the letter still in my hand. The evening sun spread gold across the fields, and the oak tree stood tall at the edge of the property. Its leaves rustled softly in the breeze. I sat beneath it, tracing the folds of the note with my fingers, remembering everything that had happened: the pain, the discovery, the truth. The light faded slowly, turning the sky into shades of amber and rose. I looked toward the horizon, feeling the calm settle deep in my chest. Grandpa had kept his promise. He had given me the last word, not through revenge, but through peace. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside me on the grass. The world felt still, balanced, as if every piece had finally found its place. Beneath the same oak where his secrets once slept, I whispered a quiet thank you, to him, to my mother, and to the silence that finally felt like home. Hey besties, thanks for staying till the end of Maeve's journey. Imagine being called a charity case, only to uncover every secret and rise stronger than ever. Sometimes peace is the best revenge, and truth heals deeper than anger. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more emotional stories. See you in the next one. Bye.